Imagine you would always know exactly what you want and never be torn between different options. You would always know which option to take for breakfast. You would be sure what to study. You would know exactly what you want to do with your life. And you would have a clear decision for everything. Well, this was really never my reality. At least for as long as I can remember, I always was this person who was easily excited by multiple options, and I always felt a bit jealous of all those people around me who knew exactly what they wanted to do, that they wanted to be a lawyer, a doctor, or whatever else they had decided on. Especially when it came to making a career decision, I always felt this tension between multiple options. I was always like, should I join a big company or a startup? Should I found my own company? Or should I join this role or that role? And all these questions have made me feel a bit anxious and also afraid of possibly making the wrong one. So I questioned, could there be a better way of approaching these paradoxical questions to eliminate my anxiety and enable me to make better decisions throughout my life journey? This was when I found out about the work of Wendy Smith. Wendy has written a book together with Marianne Lewis, Both and Thinking. Together they have done over 20 years of research about this topic, providing us with knowledge about how we can move away from these either-ors in our life and create opportunities out of these tensions and dilemmas for innovation and personal growth. So my first question for Wendy was, how can we then move away from these either-ors? And let's say I'm trying to make a decision if I want to join a smaller company or a big one. How could I better approach this question?
That shows up for us as a dilemma, and we frame it as an or. And the invitation is to say, well, what's underneath these options, and can we change it to an and? Can we change the question? So if we change the question of how can I both go to a large company and be part of a small entrepreneurial venture? Well, that doesn't seem possible, but maybe it is. And what's possible there? And so just changing the question invites us into thinking differently. In order to get there, what we have to do is pull these things apart in order to bring them together. So what is it about the large company that's really exciting to us? Well, maybe it's about, being part of a space where there's good mentorship and people that can help us out along the way. Or maybe it's about more stability. Or maybe it's about we really love the brand and we're really excited about the brand. Well, what is it about the entrepreneurial venture that we're really excited about? Well, maybe that's about entrepreneurships have more opportunity for input when you're young, or that they have more autonomy, or that it's easier to get in really quickly and get your hands dirty and really engage in it. So what are the different components of that? That's the separate part. Understand, learn, recognize what's valuable about each side. And then, how do we bring those together? So is it possible for us to be in a space where we could really value the mentorship of older people and still have the autonomy of the new entrepreneurial venture? Is it possible for us to be in a space where we can really take advantage of something that's more established and have more that exciting startup energy, entrepreneurial energy? Well, if we start to ask the question that way, there could be new and alternative things that pop up. New possibilities. Maybe it's an entrepreneurial venture within a big company, or maybe it's starting with an entrepreneurship but having really strong connections to some very clear mentors that are in larger spaces. There could be different ways to think about that option so it doesn't feel like you're throwing out both possibilities.
And what do you think can we do if such a win-win situation doesn't exist? Like, what can we do then?
What we find, and this was the earliest research that I did on my PhD, is that these kinds of win-wins don't come along that often. They're great when they do. It's great when we find the win-win, but sometimes we try and make the win-win work for us and it doesn't always work for us. And here is where a lot of our decision making has a lot more possibility, which is that in both anding, sometimes it's thinking about the bigger picture of multiple decisions over time, not just the one decision, and being what we call consistently inconsistent with those decisions, meaning that being able to be more dynamic and making multiple choices, giving ourselves the opportunity to make multiple choices over time. So it might be that we make one decision to join up with a big company now, leaving open and staying connected to a small entrepreneurship that's interested in what we do, or starting our own entrepreneurship and still having some kind of connection and opportunity to connect into that world, because we might switch and we might sort of move back and forth, or we have a side gig. It's about ongoing, being more dynamic and experimental in our decisions, not getting stuck in exactly what choice we've made at that moment.
Now, I could really resonate with what Wendy said here, because I also sometimes did two different things next to my studies, kind of creating these win-win situations or also making connections for later possibilities in my life. However, I have also found that this can defocus us, especially when we're not trying to figure out the one thing in our lives and are putting our complete focus into this one thing. So can both and thinking make us more defocused?
We agree that that kind of focus is valuable, and the one thing is often two. And here's what I mean by that. In the book that we wrote, the goal was to bring together 25 years of research that we had done, but also that a whole community of scholars had done around this notion of paradox. And one of the key tools is this idea of having what we call a statement of passion, meaning purpose, a sort of higher purpose statement of where we want to go. And so if we're talking about the one thing, I would say go up a level, as my colleague and mentor Ellen Langer would say. Go up a level from that one thing. That one thing might not be the career ladder in an existing company. The one thing might be, if I go back to my own decision, a sort of higher purpose, longer term goal of I want to make an impact in the world. And there's multiple ways of engaging with that one thing. But it's thinking about the impact that I want to make in the world that will help guide my decisions. And we see this really powerfully in companies, where one of the companies that we showcase in the book is Unilever, who is famous for putting out the Unilever Sustainable Living Plan, a large Fortune 500 company that was really committed to doubling their profits, not alongside, but through a commitment to environmental improvement and through social impact. And Paul Pullman, when we spoke to him, who was the CEO who implemented this plan, he would say the very first thing that he did was figure out what was the higher purpose statement for Unilever. What were they trying to accomplish? Because it's through that higher purpose statement that he could bring together and integrate and keep focused all of these different components. And so their higher purpose living statement is to make everyday sustainable living. But it's through that he can stay with a commitment to both a social mission, the impact that they have on the people that they serve, their employees, their customers, the world, the impact that they have on environmental impact, and their need to have financial improvement. So in some ways, if we take that one thing and we make it a bigger, higher purpose statement, the long-term vision, we can then ask ourselves, how do these various components come into that one thing that's the bigger picture? But if that one thing is narrow, like I'm going to be a great podcaster, well then, for some people that might be great. That might be their one thing and that's all they want to do. But that does limit us in terms of, well, what do we want to do with that podcast, and why? And why am I trying to do this entrepreneurial venture? And what is it about that? And how can other components and other things that I'm doing inform that bigger picture?
I know that either or thinking can also influence our relationships badly, and especially when we're trying to have a hard conversation. Why do you think that is the case, and how can we have better conversations in relationships?
Because it is so easy for us to pick a point of view and then somebody else sort of responds, rejects, challenges, essentially by putting a stake in the ground and picking that point of view, it invites somebody else to sort of pick the alternative point of view, and then all you have is two points of view, and the only place you can go is who's right and who's wrong. And we go to that right-wrong place so easily and so quickly. There is a tremendous amount of research about why we do that. We do that because of our egos. We do that because we have a certain amount of data. They have a certain amount of data, and it's, it's sort of our identities are at stake, our egos are at stake, we're challenging ourselves to, we want to be right. And that's what gets us into these conflictual, difficult conversations, because if we assume that I'm right, and if the only way for me to be right is for you to be wrong, well, then I have to prove you wrong at all times, and we're in that tangle, if you will. The invitation, and this is not always easy to do, particularly when the issues that are on the table are things that are dear to our heart, or that we feel really committed to, or that we really do have a point of view on. The invitation is to stop and pause and listen to somebody else's truth, and value their truth and their reality, and consider it, even if we don't necessarily agree with it. Then we can come to some both deeper relationships because we've honored other people, and perhaps a better decision. Now, sometimes those decisions might mean, okay, I have listened to you, I've heard you, but I am going to end up, making a different decision than you do and deciding something different. But if we just start by listening, really listening, not judging, not giving our point of view through listening, not listening in order to challenge or to offer our alternative, but really out of a curiosity of, I'm curious about who you are and what you have to say, then we can come to a better place in the long term.
What do you think is so tough about both and thinking?
But it's an ongoing process of checking in with our emotions and how defensive we get and how anxious we get and what we're fearful of and what we're afraid of that leads us back into the either or. And it's an ongoing process of reminding ourselves that it's going to be okay and we can be more dynamic and create change and shift along the way, or an ongoing process of clarifying and specifying our higher purpose, longer term vision, one focus, and asking ourselves whether we're in that. That's the ongoing process. So even as I think that there is an easy entree into this, I don't want to paint this as an easy way that we can all engage in this kind of more complex and emotionally challenging thinking. I think it's more complex and emotionally challenging. I think that's hard, and I want to invite people to be on the path toward constantly getting there, even as it's not easy to do.
Wendy, I know that you teach so many young people, and you've of course also made your own journey through your 20s. What is some kind of advice that you would give your younger self that you would have wished to know earlier?
It would be to be open to the possibilities and let go of the anxieties, because it will all work out. And that doesn't mean that it always does work out. What it means is that by letting go of the anxiety, it lets the working out happen more, be more creative to allowing the working out to happen. And I had an advisor at my PhD program, Ellen Langer, who wrote a brilliant book, Mindfulness. And she used to say, it's not about making the right decision. It's about making the decision right. And meaning that it's about the ongoing work and experimentation and engagement that we do with the decisions that we make, realizing that it's not just one decision that we make at a period in time, but that we're always making decisions. Minimize the anxiety and know that the world will unfold, and feel confident in our capabilities to evaluate that unfolding.